everyone, it's Allison here, also known as Lasan Faye over on Instagram. And I'm here today to bring you another Zen Doodle with me video. This time for the Zen Art Challenge days February 5th all the way through February 11th. So next week, right here. Join me and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first pattern today is called Banderole, and it was made by Lizzie Main, and I'll include a link in the description below. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first step is to create these lines kind of at the border with little dots in between them. I guess I know I use a dot grid, but I'm actually still just going to draw in my own dots because the dot grid is a little too thin for what I want to do. Okay, so these dots and lines act as the starting guideline, and we connect the dot that's opposite its line to each other. So I drew all of these lines freehand, but feel free that if you want to go ahead and use a ruler to draw those lines if it's going to bother you that they're not perfectly straight. For me, I actually kind of like how it looks at the end of the day, and so that's why I just do it freehand. Okay, so the next step is to kind of make these little half circles. Just a little ways up from the bottom, and on the triangles that point upward, you put the circle or the semicircles on the right side, and for those that point downward, you put them semicircles on the left side. So yeah, that's a little bit low, so I'll fix that in the next one. And 1, 2. All right. And after that, you kind of just fill in by making more semicircles going around and cutting them off whenever you hit the edge of a triangle. So I'm going to do this one first just because I think it'll be easier to see. Some advice that I have is, especially when you get to the point where you are getting cut off, go ahead and just kind of check how far away you are and then move that far away on the other side. And then I know there's some people that just kind of go sweep through and then don't even check and just continue the motion, but they lift the pen in between. I am not always that precise, and so I do what I can as I can. Okay, so I'm kind of going to speed through this next part as I repeat this process. Alright, and that is more or less it for this Tangle. If you want, you could do some shading on the sides to give it a little more character. I do not consider myself great with shading, and so it's a step I generally skip. but for future reference, feel free to do that for yourself. Okay, the next Tangle pattern that we're going to do today is called Steep, and it was made by Jenny D. Mills. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. But yeah, so I'm just going to dive right in. And so you start off, I like to work from the top down, especially in patterns like these. And you form like a little bit of a rotated square. And then a little flower petal, or I actually think of this more as like an eye shape, like the human eye. But that's just me. And then another little square. And another eye, which really, once we get done with this, these are kind of going to look like eyes, if you want to sneak a peek at the remaining directions. Alright, so that's the base setup for one of them. So after you do your base setup, you kind of do a little dot in the middle of the squares. And then to do this little circle effect, you start by making your largest circle in the center. I'm just going to go ahead and do that on both of them. Wow, now they really look like eyes. And then you can size the smaller circles based off of the space that's left for them. Alright, so that is kind of how the first one gets done. I'm going to go ahead and set up the second one a little bit faster. So alright, so that is now the second one that I have. And so now what's going to happen is we kind of create these little ribbons that go between them. And it's almost like a very curvy print Z. That's how I'm approaching the thought process for drawing these. And then, yeah, so they kind of look like little banners. And you can fill in about, well, what's suggested is like every other one. Kind of like shading it in and then like doing other methods of connection. I know, mine's not as pretty as what's drawn, but that's okay. I just have to like it. And you know what? I do like it. And so I'm gonna go ahead and do another one just because I have the space too. And voila! So that is steep. Which, yeah, no, now that I think about it, it kind of makes me think of tea in a way. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, up next is Gotcha, and it is by Karen Godins? Apologize for if I mispronounce your name. And I'll include a link to the source below, but I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So first thing you do is you make an X, whatever space you're in, and that becomes your base framework. And then from on the right hand side of each line, you start at the top, or at least that's my preference, is to start at the top, and do a small arch that flattens out and comes down and meets with the next line over. Okay, so after you've made your initial X setup, you can extend it by a few more. The directions are saying so that way you have 3 lines all together. So 1, 2, and pretty much you just start at the same point. You'll note I am rotating my page so that way I can easily do some of these lines, and yeah, that's like totally an okay thing to do. Alright, so I have now expanded on all the sides, and I can now, it is now time to do the other side, so that way it kind of all folds together. So again, it's the same thing, just coming from the other direction, and you meet and stop at where the fan currently is. Okay, and that is the third Tangle pattern for this week. So yeah, some other advice for those of you who might want to like neaten some of the things up. I kind of got really lucky to make this look a little bit cleaner. From where you came down, if you want, you can put a little dot on the other side and draw to that dot, and then it just seems like a seamless loop, which I think would be really cool. I didn't implement it myself, but it might be something to consider if you want to neaten this up a bit. And so I'm going to leave this pattern here. Alright, so this next pattern, it does not have a name that I know of, and I checked the source, but it kind of looks like leaves, and it can be found on graphistica.com, and I'll include a link below. But let's go ahead and get started. So it looks like part of the suggestion is to build from the bottom, go up, or at least that's how I'm going to do it. So kind of make a little leaf, a little bottom leaf. It's sort of like a half heart shape. Sorry about that. Got a message from one of my friends. Then just doing that. And it looks like after they started the baseline, they made a little stem. And from there, you kind of continue your little half heart shapes. Which, for me, the way I do those is I go from the bottom and into the swell. So, I'm just going to continue this all the way up. So I now have my little leafy structure, and you could add leaves going left and right as you please, or combine little vines, but I'm going to skip that for what I'm doing and swap over to a different pen because I'm going to do slightly thicker lines now. In order to do some shading. Well, I say shading. It's really not shading so much as it is like finding some places to fill in. And this is actually a little tip in regards to supplies. And that is get pens with different tip sizes, because doing some of the dark shading is really hard on a thin tip size, but it's a lot easier if you have a larger tip. So that is it for me on this Tangle. You can add embellishments like little wisps coming off to the side. That's a personal preference. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, but I'm going to leave this one as is. And move on to the next one. Okay, this next Tangle is by the same artist as the last one, so this one I also couldn't find a name for, but it can be found on graphistica.com. And so I'm kind of just going to dive in. And so the first thing to do with this Tangle is kind of make a little anemone shape. So what I do is I pick a center point and I draw outward from there and make the little loop on the end. Okay, so now that I have that, the next thing to do is kind of form a blob from it. And so the way I see to do that is to start on the outside and do a slightly larger loop coming in. And it kind of curves, like right before the end. All right, and it looks like these go all the way in. Oh yeah. And you kind of continue this habit going all the way around. Okay, so while I know the directions indicated this earlier, doing some shading, I like to do all of my shading all at once. So that is what I'm going to do really quick and just kind of fill in main bubbles where there's some space. Okay, so obviously I still have this space left, and what it looks like it's just doing is essentially reversing this little teardrop. So I swoop in, swoop out, and then really honestly you could fill this in however you wanted. I'm just kind of doing my own thing. Mostly because I just want to see how it looks. All right, so that is it for this Tangle. And I'm gonna move on to the next one. All right, this next Tangle is Hurry Holly by Sue Jacobs. I'll include a link to the source below. And with this one, you're kind of just gonna create little bands of 4 curved lines. So 1, let's darken that a bit. 2, 3, 4. All right, so I have my first 4, and now I can draw in another 4. And you kind of just repeat the process again and again until either the space is filled or you're tired of drawing it. That's about as full as I want it. Some people might like it fuller. If you leave it as a looser weave, I guess, that's how I'll phrase that, you could shade in some of the blank spaces. But yeah, like, I'm actually really happy with where it's at right now, so I'm gonna leave it as is and move on to the next Tangle. The final Tangle for today is SXC Rolls, and it was made by Yuru Chen. I'll include a link in the description below. And so, and I actually like how the instructions work because I can really see how the title comes about. And so let's just go ahead and get started. So to do this, you kind of make an elongated S. And then I'm going to rotate my book a little bit so that way I can get a better angle. And then you make another elongated S such that the two kind of meet in an X cross, which I know mine looks more like a T, but I could have angled it better and the X shape would have come out more. But so that's the S and the X. And then finally, there's the C, which to me kind of looks like they get drawn from the bottom up. But you go to a tip of one of the S's and you draw your C and curl in. And just continue that going around. Okay, and then the next thing to do to kind of get rid of some of the dead space is to make these other C or crescent moon-like shapes that curl out and come in. You want them to come out far enough to touch your previous C curve that you have. Okay, and one final one. And with this one, what I recommend is if you're nervous about how wide your curve needs to be, underestimate it, because this next step that you do is shading it in. And so anything that is underestimated will disappear into the blackness and you just shade. So I'm a little unhappy with how the shading turned out in this area. I wanted a little more definition. And so the way I'm kind of going to edit that is I'm going to take a white gel pen. All right, so that is it for the tangles for today. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more, please subscribe. And I guess I will see you all next week. Take care. Have a good day. Bye.